Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 3 of Mind Over Marketing. We wanted to talk about how AI is really, proliferating across everyday use cases, not just the stuff that you're seeing behind the screen, right? I think everybody is hearing news about, the latest LLMs and, all these cool content creation and marketing and sales use cases, but it is going so far beyond that into our physical world and really our everyday and personal lives. And so Steven, if you guys didn't know, he has been in the public sector space for a long time. He sees a very different side of the world than what I see, I think, on a day to day. And I think he sees the side of the world that impacts everyone here more, I think, as everyday people, not as everyday employees. So I thought it was really cool to have him just kind of put him in the hot seat and talk about some of the use cases he's seeing. So, one of the things that was top of mind, Stephen, was obviously Hurricane Milton, super tragic disaster that happened over the last month. Really, really feel for a lot of the Floridians that have lost their homes and, lost loved ones. But what do you see as what AI could potentially do to help with situations that are needed for disaster recovery?
And as you said, our heart goes out first and foremost to anyone who's impacted by these horrible natural disasters. If we
Yeah.
look at what we can do to rebuild faster or to find people quicker, obviously in any of these situations, when you have a natural disaster, time is of the essence. And if you can get help to someone faster, then you can make life critical changes and really change the trajectory of someone's experience pretty markedly, if not completely. So when we talk about what's the art of the possible, there's a lot of investigation into can there be some opt-in, and with the public sector, it always you want to default to an opt-in. Can you have an opt-in posture where people who are in a sensitive situation, or they're elderly, they have a medical situation, they have some special need for which their mobility is challenged? Can we have AI sort of programmatically say, okay, this event has happened, or an earthquake has happened, or a tsunami has happened. Now we flag these individuals for a wellness check. And that can be something where you're trying to prioritize people who may need help first and who've sort of raised their hand for that help. And I think when we're looking at how that can happen, AI can do a number of things, from finding who they are to saying, okay, someone might be their geolocation of their home, maybe below the floodplain, or you could look at a number of things that would take a human operator a long time to try to figure out.
Totally. I mean, I see a world where disaster responses can ideally be shortened. And to your point, I think emphasizing the opt in aspect is going to be really important. But once you have that data, what generative AI is going to allow, you know, different organizations in how they respond to these emergency situations is going to be completely, hopefully, completely different, a lot faster, a lot more efficient. On the flip side, in terms of like public programs that you're seeing, what are you seeing that you think is gonna impact our day to day? Especially in the arts and cultural programs and all that.
Well, you see, there's sort of some of the areas where I think the public is most excited to be as experimental as possible in moving the needle. There's areas where we, as a nation, have to come together and figure out, defense, targeting, and other areas. These are sort of meaty ethical areas that we need to look at. But cultural areas, I think, are really some of the first things that we can get into and really make some transformative impact. And I know the Smithsonian has been really looking at how to use AI, how to come to the museum, and a lot of these works of art have a rich history that of academic research that's gone on. So for someone of the public to be able to just come in and see this piece of art maybe in a new way, because they're able to engage with an intelligent response sort of bot, for lack of a better word, but to
Yeah.
give them the full breadth of 1,000 years of scholarship on some of these items, and really help magnify the impact of an experience. And when you see something in person, obviously it's so much more of an appointment that you have versus seeing something online. So I think it can really make these moments much more special. And we're looking at cultural institutions across the board that are bringing that in.
Yeah, I love that. I can only imagine it's not gonna be very long before, I take my toddler into a discovery museum, and he can literally go up and be like, "How many moons does Saturn have?" Or, how like who's the artist that built this sculpture, and he's able to get responses, and that's going to just make the arts programs just so much more enriched with,
Yeah.
I guess, personalized information that's tuned to exactly what you'd like to learn or about a certain exhibit or a certain piece of art. It's really
Yeah.
cool.
No, and I was out west, Capitol Reef National Park. If anyone goes out that way in Utah, it was beautiful. One of the areas they had some ancient stone carvings, which some folks maybe even believe or predate some of the Native American civilizations that are out there. And the Native Americans say they actually, part of their lore, part of their stories, speak to some of these carvings. So the sign simply talked about this reality, but how much more impactful would it be to go there and be able to hear some of these stories that have been passed down generation for 1,000 years, and it would really maybe make that Native American group that much more heard or present in park experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, there are obviously some ramifications that I guess you're kind of putting out there for public sector institutions to take into consideration. What are you kind of thinking of in that space in terms of the ramifications that organizations should be on the lookout for?
So there's two things. There's the defense issue is as more and more of our world is assisted, let's just say, by algorithms and LLMs, the ability of an adversary to poison that data, to inject non-true data into that LLM, could then impact an outcome. And you could think of a sensor on a dam for water that says, you know what, there's no maintenance needed, when in fact maintenance is needed. And then you could think of the outcomes that happen because of that. How many sensors would have to be sort of compromised? It's actually not that difficult. And these are not the most hardened things. So there's a lot of soft targets out there in our LLMs. We need to look at that. And I think also the other area, sort of beyond the securing our own assets and being on the lookout for what our adversaries may be able to do, would be to say, where do we want to draw the line and say, no, we actually don't want the government to use AI for these purposes? And I think, that line is, maybe there's generational aspects, and we can talk about some of those, later on. But there are going to be different comfort zones that people have in the police or government or the military, being able to use AI to make certain decisions versus a human being. And so I think that it really opens up the realm of what you could do in terms of tracking and finding people.
Totally, and we're definitely not the ethics and AI experts in that sense, but I think you
Right.
bring up a really great point. You called it data poisoning, right? In terms of data poisoning, I think there's gonna be and I see organizations already doing this, like using a combination of LLMs, but also SLMs that are much more secure,
Right.
proprietary, like smaller language models to prevent not only hallucinations, but then to your point, data poisoning. Because I see it now, people are looking to try and almost train these LLMs to say what they want it to say by,
Right.
I don't know what tactics they're doing, but they're finding ways and they're experimenting. So no, I think that's a really interesting point. But what I'm seeing is that, there's gonna be AI across our everyday life, and it's gonna go well beyond us going up to, chat GPT and just asking it basic questions of, asking it for tax advice and all that. It's literally going to be all across our physical world.
Yeah.
Tesla just had their We Robot event. We're going to see autonomous cars. You just saw SpaceX like literally catch that rocket ship with a chopstick,
Unbelievable.
or their quote unquote chopstick. But I also think, things like, 3D printers at home and what is it, laser cutters. You're going to be able to speak things into existence. You're going to be able to say, hey, I need, a toddler spoon. Can you create, and it's going to be able to whip up a 3D CAD file for you, and you're going to be able to print it at home. So
Right.
it's going to be really interesting to see, at least over the next year or two, how far we get, because 2024 from January looks very different from where we are today, and
Oh,
everything's
absolutely.
just moving faster.
No, faster is definitely. I think when people saw the beginning of the year, a lot of folks said, you know what, this is just hype. And I
Yeah.
think what we're seeing is the reality is catching up with that hype very, very quickly. And I think 25, we're going to see a lot of these things go mainstream.
Yeah. And you were saying that there was a event, in DC that happened. Tell us about that.
Yeah, no. So as we were chatting kind of before, there was a condo building in Washington D.C., and it made the decision to remove the human door person or doorman and put an intelligent kiosk in its place. So it would indicate where your package might be. You would be able to engage with it to file some kind of a maintenance request. A lot of these sort of simple things that before maybe you had to talk to the doorman in this luxury building to do. And again, this kind of goes back to as we were talking about before on the ethical side. This is on the preference side, but
Yeah.
those same sort of generational questions are going to come up, and sometimes it's generational, sometimes it's not. Some people prefer the security of having a person there. Some people prefer just the chit chat with a human being. On the other hand, some people would prefer that nobody knows they're coming and going, or who goes into their home and who doesn't, and what hours they keep or don't keep. And so it goes into a lot of these preferences issues, and it's going to be interesting to see where it lands, because obviously you could probably make a strong case in either direction, but it's a brave new world, and it's going to be an interesting one because a lot of these rich experiences are coming to our doorstep.
Yeah. And that's a great example of a trend that I'm seeing right now, which is voice-led AI experiences, right? And that's taking a lot of different forms. Like you have Bland.ai that's making like phone agents. You have Meta, you have Gemini, literally putting voice capability. So instead of having to type out your prompt, you're just talking to it as if you're talking to a friend. I really think that voice is a medium, is literally becoming the interface for communicating with
Yeah.
generative AI. And we're even seeing a lot of like omni-channel use cases. You'll hear of the concept like digital twin. You'll hear of companies like Synthesia and Hey Gen creating like people that look and sound like real people, but it's really AI.
Right.
It's an AI avatar that's,
Right.
you can even record your own voice, do a copy of your face and your voice. It's pretty interesting of the progress that we've made there.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area. I think sort of the we've been primed to interface with computers in that way.
Yeah.
Maybe it's Hollywood, maybe it's something else. We're certainly used to seeing people interface with a computer as a character, and I think that leads us to make it natural for us instead of looking at a keyboard to be able to say, computer enhance or computer I want to turn or can you bring in this or bring in that, analysis layer. It's going to be an interesting way to see, and I think a little bit of that we saw with the Apple Vision, and I think maybe the next generation of that, as it comes out, we'll see even more.
Yeah, those Meta Ray Bans I think are kind of that smaller form factor version of the Apple
Yeah,
Vision. I mean, I think it's safe to say whatever you guys are seeing as a marketer, as a sales professional, business leader, obviously in the B2B space, a ton happening with content creation, but just be prepared. There's a lot on the horizon that's going to impact your kids, your parents, and it's going to be a part of our everyday lives. And frankly, I think it's going to happen whether people want it to happen or not. Um, but, in the end, what I found is there's a lot that I'm uncertain about on where we're going, but there's also a lot of really cool stuff that I'm happy about that AI has enabled. For example, I just made very recently, I actually posted about this on LinkedIn, a custom lullaby for both of my boys. I went to Suno app. I typed in their name. I gave them their favorite colors. My firstborn loves planets, and it gave me this awesome lullaby, purpose built for Elijah, my firstborn, and then my one for my secondborn, Oliver. So it's really cool. And I know you came from kind of the movie scene, and there's just so much happening there. So
yeah,
really excited on what that's going to open
absolutely. And
up for us.
I lived in New York for a number of years in Manhattan, and around the turn of the millennium, and I was
Yeah.
very much into that indie movie scene, and it's amazing the transformation in that medium from where it was to where it is today. And I think the new frontier is going to be, can sort of the public have cinema grade video graphics to make photorealistic characters do things, and for not just for a 30-second scene, but for a 2-hour movie? Are the apps going to allow that? Obviously Christopher Nolan's going to be in some universe of his own, doing his own thing.
Yep,
And it's going to be much better
yep.
than any one of us could put together. But passable entertainment, it's going to be interesting to see. We saw a lot of self-publishing happen when it's sort of Kindle and that came out. And is this going to be sort of a new frontier for that, where you don't need to be, you don't need a camera crew, a cinematographer, a sound design studio. If you can bring all of that into an app, it's going to be a new frontier.
Yeah, like I just made my own podcast episode the other day. I uploaded a report to Google Notebook LM, and it generated me a podcast of a report that was super long, super dense, super complicated, made it all conversational. I'm just curious how companies like Disney or Paramount Pictures are going to prevent spin-offs of their own, iconic movies. Like imagine The Little Mermaid, people creating their own spin-off version, right? So that's going to be interesting to see how regulations keep up with generative AI.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting because the movie studios, I think Star Wars and Star Trek are the ones that see the most of this fan videos.
Yeah,
And a lot of the fan, so when the fan video looks for a profit motive, that's when they'll sort of get involved. But right now, since the barrier to a quality video is high cost, if
yeah,
that cost goes down to, $1,000, $100, then
yep.
the volume, I don't think the studios are ready for the volume that could be coming their way. It's going to be really interesting to see where we get our information from, where we get our videos from. And is Netflix going to be the broker anymore, or is it going to be TikTok or YouTube?
Oh, that's crazy. I mean, this was so I love this stuff, and I was like, "Dang, Steven knows so much more about me about how AI is gonna impact the real world." So, I was like, "Let's record this conversation
Uh,
because if I'm interested, others are probably gonna be interested too." Anyways, thanks, Steven, for just like
yes,
dropping some knowledge bomb on us
here
and
we
some
are.
really cool insights. And yeah, thanks everybody.
Great
Stay
talking to you
tuned
as
for
always.
Yeah,
Yeah,
awesome. Stay tuned for episode 4, which hopefully will come out in the next couple weeks.
absolutely.